And boom, we're going. How you doing, Cy?
All right. Hi. Good morning, Travis.
Good morning.
Or good afternoon, I should say.
Yeah, I'm kind of still morning here, but we're
Where
close.
are you? Are you on the West Coast?
Yeah, I'm in LA area.
Oh, too bad. I just saw some coverage last night of the Street of Horrors in San Francisco and in LA.
Oh, what is
Uh,
that?
the homeless and the tents, and I
Oh,
saw some pictures that really just were distressful.
mm-hmm.
I just and this lady who was an activist, she said she was trying to get a hold of the councilmen and the state legislatures, and they don't answer. Uh, it's not their backyard.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
no, it's tough. There's a lot of that stuff, and here in Long Beach, we live right by the beach, and there's a park. But every morning, I see the same guys and say hello to them and stuff, and they seem to be living their life and enjoying as much as they can. So,
well, Hawaii's got the same problem. They live on the beach. And of course, cost of living there is a lot different.
that's true. That's true.
Well, enough of how bad the world looks.
Yeah.
What's on your mind?
I was not expecting to go there, but yeah, I mean, thanks for
Well,
being on, taking the time.
you know,
Yeah, it's part of life.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, we got the 50th anniversary of the moon landing coming up, so I know you're busy with that.
yeah, there's been a lot of poking around, wanting. I try to do what I can, but in fact, I got a got a note from a friend of mine. I appeared for him in Zurich, Switzerland, about 3 years ago, and he says, "What am I doing on July 20th?" And I says, "Well, I'm trying to get out of a reunion that we're having here, and I feel guilty if I don't go. But if you've got me a better deal, I'll be in Switzerland." So, but and there's just another thing. There's a London Space Center that has created a little tour for four of us flight controllers to go to London and then go over to Toulouse, France. It's a 6 day thing,
Wow.
and it's a paying gig, so I can't complain.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's good. I mean, you still get to do stuff like that. Do you enjoy kind of, sharing, meeting these people and kind of sharing your story and stuff still, or is it?
Well, I've been professionally speaking for about 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
Things have, as time has gone by, it's kind of tapered down.
Yeah.
So I would do like a half a dozen a year, and it was not bad. It's always fun to tell the stories, and I got about half a dozen talks that I can give with PowerPoint slides and
Nice.
audio and all that, and it's been fun.
Cool.
It's been to go over to a foreign or a new uh, lecture site and find out that they're not prepared. They don't have the equipment, or the equipment's failed. So you ought to see what I take with me in my computer bag. I mean, circuit testers, 40, 50 feet of cables.
Oh my gosh.
Everything is based upon a failure.
Yep.
Really hard to look around. But they
Yeah.
do that. They're not prepared. They think they are, but they're not. And I almost had my computer go down. I was up in where the hell was I? I was up in Vermont somewhere doing this Bear Academy school. Anyway, so they wanted me to give a talk in their little theater that they had. It was an old lecture hall. And Jerry Carr, one of our Skylab astronauts, was living up there. And so he said, they asked him to give a talk also. I said, well, you can use my laptop. I'll put it up on the stage extension right behind us, and you can put your CD on it. And, it's so we fortunately the battery was fully charged because the techs brought me out a power cable, laid it down. I plugged my computer in. There's no power on that cable.
That's nice of them.
And what we said is I had about 5 minutes of battery power left, and I didn't find out the next morning. So I have a circuit tester I take with me now. And
Right. Oh my gosh.
can you imagine? Hand me a power cable with no. Anyway, so it's always been it's been fun.
Yes.
It's been fun.
There's always challenges and everything, huh?
Yeah, especially when you go overseas. And then now you got a real. There's another little gadget that you might keep around. It's called an op amp. It's really a headset amplifier, is all it is. And
Uh-huh.
a couple of my slides, try as I did with this little application I've got, I couldn't balance the sound level in it to balance with the rest of the slide audios, and that just drove me crazy. So I noticed that somebody said, "Hey, you gotta get an op amp," and what it is you put this little tiny amplifier, probably only got one chip in it, and you can control the sound yourself. It's in between the output of your laptop, the audio output, and the input to their sound system.
Oh.
If I have a slide or something happens where they screw up, I can just readjust the volume myself. It's another gadget which you got to carry with you in order to not have a problem.
Yeah, really.
But most of the RS don't have to worry about it. They carry around a little memory stick, and they figure everything's going to be taken care of for them. It's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Find out it's not true. But they expect it.
Yep.
I expect nothing. Anyway.
Yes. Well, let's get to some Apollo stuff.
Apollo 11 50th anniversary coming up, and everybody's jumping on the bandwagon. They're making documentaries, and this thing on the National Space Center, whatever it's called in London, is doing a thing on Apollo 10. So we'll do a lot of Q&A stuff like that around for people and students. So that's Apollo 10, and we had a guy from Science Channel doing something from UK. Also, well, we have a lot of fans in UK. It's amazing. They're probably better fans over there for our space program than here.
Oh.
That surprised me.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah, it's the way it is. So he called up and he wanted to do this a thing on Apollo 13. I said, well, okay, fine.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember looking at him. I said, I said, this is the thing that NBC did years ago. It's an hour-long show, TV show, and it's broken into 4 segments or 4 topics.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the topics is Apollo 13 for you, right? He says, yes. I said, well, this was done years ago in the old control center. And I remember looking at the NBC producer, and I said, how long is this segment going to run? He says, without the commercials, 12 minutes. I said, you're going to tell the story of Apollo 13 in 12 minutes? He says, sure. He says, masters of triviality. And I was, you sure? So,
oh my God.
That's what they did.
Wow. Okay, so do you have a favorite or best documentary or program that you have that's documented the Apollo era at NASA?
Yeah, it was the premiere Apollo 13, if you want to talk about Apollo 13, documentary that was done by PBS,
mm-hmm.
KCBH in Boston, I guess it was.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago. And they went about it. They had a whole hour. It was PBS. In fact, they actually won some awards with it. And I remember, I can't remember the name of the producer. He says, we're looking for storytellers. Kranz is a storyteller, and he says, you're a storyteller, and I can't find enough storytellers because they'll switch back to the real people from the documentary, and they will tell a little anecdote or something.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I went to the rectifier officer that was there, Chuck Dietrich, and I went to him, Texas boy, and I said, how did it feel when you had to plan the return and you had to watch out that you stayed on course, blah, blah, blah. And Chuck just looked at me, this guy, producer said, hey man, I was just doing my job. No, tell me what was going through your mind. I mean, you got to think of a lot of things, blah, blah, blah. Hey man, I was just doing my job. And it just drove this producer crazy. I was just doing my job, not a storyteller.
Yeah. Oh man.
Otherwise.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Just an old, very smart country boy turned out to be a good engineer.
Yeah.
So PBS. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
No, I don't think I've seen that, but I'm going to look that up.
Let me see if I can find the actual title of it, because if you haven't got that in your collection, you can still buy it on, I think, Amazon. I
Okay.
mean, we're talking 20 years.
Okay.
And let me see if I still have. I can never remember. I can never remember the name of these damn things.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's a bunch of documentaries that have been made on this that involve you.
Is this the one? Yeah, this is it. You can still get it.
Okay, To the Edge and Back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because what I get confused is I did a CD documentary for Arts and Letters years ago, and it was called something like this, and I always get it confused. That was called, they're out of business sale, Hall 13. Where is it? A Race Against Time. So that was good. But this one's still available. This is the documentary on Apollo 13.
Okay, cool. So yeah. So for people listening, it's Apollo 13 To the Edge and Back, PBS on Amazon.
KCBH has seen on public television, and I bought a couple extra one of these from Amazon just to have in my collection.
Okay.
But
sweet. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna check that out.
If you don't have it in your collection, you're foolish.
You're missing out.
You're deficient.
Whew. All right, man. Well, let's talk about you, Cy. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. Yeah, that's what's so cool about it. It's so well documented. But I mean, it was just 50 years ago. But does it feel like it's been 50 years ago since all this happened?
No. You'll find this as you get older. I'm 83 now, and it's really crazy because you look over telescoped. I mean, really does feel like it wasn't just yesterday, but just more recent than it should be.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing what happens to the sense of time, but it's true. It really happens.
Yeah. Which
is probably pretty good because you've got something to reminisce about while you're rocking on the, on the front porch.
While you're rocking on the front porch.
You have to keep yourself. Anyway, so there you are. So that's something you probably ought to have.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate the other Apollo 13 thing we did. The guy went out of business, and he did it. He did it on an old-fashioned. Well, it wasn't old-fashioned. A 32-bit word instead of 64-bit, which we use now.
Mm-hmm.
It's not compatible with 64-bit. So it's
oh my gosh.
So these CDs sit there, and there's nothing you can do about it except recompile the executive program of the thing, and nobody's going to do that.
Yeah.
Too bad.
Jeez.
Anyway, there's a lot of great anecdotes in this stuff. One of the things we put on that other CD was typically you get a lot of postcards and letters and requests for pictures and all that. Which I don't do any autographs from home. Nothing. Zero. I found out it was a bad idea, and it is a bad idea. Once people out there that know that you will sign, you'll be inundated. It's just,
jeez.
I got my Boy Scout troop, and I can send me 40 copies of this photo, please. Yeah, right.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Anyway, this kid sent me a handwritten letter. I guess he was 12 years old at the time. How he really enjoyed the program. And he wrote, nice letter. It's all in cursive, which I think they're going to teach again in the schools.
Yeah.
And that's right. A lot of people don't have cursive writing anymore. So anyway, he sent me a really nice letter. We put that in the CD. We took a photograph of it and put it in the CD as some miscellaneous stuff that was interesting. And the programmers decided they wanted to go find this kid. I mean, this is 20 years later.
Uh-huh.
And they found him in Chicago. Somebody's working for one of these ticket companies.
Right. Wow.
I just couldn't believe it. Anyway, that's kind of nice to know that he took the technical stuff to heart and pursued it. But for Ticketron, that's what it was.
Oh, okay. And that's on the To the Edge and Back documentary?
No, it's not. Unfortunately, it's on this other one.
The one that we can't watch.
You can't. It won't play on your computer or anything unless you got a 30-bit machine.
Not me.
30 machines. And some people do. They have old machines and they can play this stuff.
Oh, okay.
I don't.
Yeah.
So I've got a whole bunch of. I had a contract with the company. It was called Arts and Letters. They're still in business, but unfortunately, the owner died, sold it, and they're not interested in space.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would do, since he couldn't afford to pay me my fee for our contract,
Mm-hmm.
I just every time I needed a half a dozen copies of the thing, he would cut me half a dozen copies, and I'd sell them at the autograph conventions or something.
Right.
Not anymore. What a shame.
Yeah.
Yeah, if this CD is a real collector's item. It turns out my book is a collector's item now. If you can find a hardback, brand new, that's signed, it's going to cost you at least $150.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
How's that feel to have your signature worth so much?
But there is a guy that sells memorabilia. His name is Steve Hankow. He's in LA. In fact, he's in Paris. And he's got a number of signed copies of the hardback, which he'll sell a lot cheaper than that.
Oh, okay. Cool.
If that's, I think, well, yeah, he's one of the memorabilia sellers that you can trust. He really knows his stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I was surprised. There's another book which I think I told you about. It was called Apollo Race to the Moon by Charles Murray and his wife, Captain Bly Cox. It's the definitive book of how we went to the moon.
Okay.
Absolutely, the definitive book. He is a conservative social scientist, PhD, MIT, and people who are not conservative hate his guts because he says things that they don't like to talk about.
I see. Yeah.
He's a scientist.
Yeah.
And for some odd reason, he and his wife decided that they would write a book about how we got to the moon.
Right.
And it took 5 years, and he was about finished with it in 5. But he interviewed everybody that had anything to do with the design and development of what it took to get to the moon, hardware-wise, testing-wise. And if the people had died, he would talk to people who knew those people. So he's about as complete a book as you can get, but in an anecdotal manner, which is a lot more fun to read.
Right.
Not one astronaut in it.
Oh, okay.
Mike Collins, he was our CMP of Apollo 11. He reviewed the book because he has a very good book, which I don't read astronaut books. Why bother? And well, there's no reason to. I mean, they don't know what we did, and we know what they did.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
As far as they were concerned, we were just part of the vast infrastructure on the ground that pointed them at the moon.
Oh, wow.
We flight controllers are nothing special to most of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. But anyway, he reviewed the book and told Charles Murray, he says, it's a very good book, but he says, there's no astronauts in it. That was the point.
Right. Interesting. I never thought about that.
Terrific. That was the definitive book. And we'll also ask we flight controllers what the mission was that really was exciting and important to us, and it was Apollo 8.
Oh, really?
And the answer comes back, well, what about Apollo 11? Well, Apollo 11 was just the culmination of a well-designed test program.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget that. Apollo 8 was we needed to get to the moon before the Russians they were close.
Yeah.
So they blew up their rockets. And Apollo 8 was an anomaly because we just needed to get to the moon before they did. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it.
Yeah.
So anyway, but Apollo 11 was just the culmination of all the testing we did. We did Apollo 7 to test the spacecraft and certain of the systems in Earth orbit was safe. 8 was an anomaly. 9 we was an Earth orbit mission where we tested the lunar module and the spacecraft together.
Mm-hmm.
We set the lunar module, we separated and redocked and
right.
did and all that was exciting. And then Apollo 10, we went to the moon. We went into lunar orbit. We went within 6 miles of the surface and didn't land.
Mm-hmm.
Apollo 11, we landed.
Yep.
We couldn't have landed on Apollo 10 anyway because the lunar module didn't have the power to do it, and it was heavy.
Uh-huh.
So we couldn't have done it anyway. But Apollo 11 was just the culmination of all that.
Yeah.
So 8 was an anomaly as far as the test program was concerned.
So, okay, so yeah, can you clarify? I guess I'm a little confused. Like, why was 8 an anomaly?
Because it wasn't part of the carefully thought out sequential program to get to the landing on the moon.
Uh-huh.
We just stuck it in there because we got worried that the Russians were going to beat us to the moon.
I see. Okay.
We didn't have a lunar module.
Yeah.
And of course, we're asking, what happens if we had an Apollo 13 failure like we had on Apollo 13 on Apollo 8? This is what they would have been dead within 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
We didn't have a unused storehouse of consumables that we could eke out to get us back home.
Okay, I see.
That was a guts mission, as we say. I remember I was so excited about that back in those days. I was side saddling or training. It's my last training mission. And when we were really stressed out because we wanted to make sure that the crew got into lunar orbit. They had to fire the big Ceres propulsion engine to slow us down and be captured by the moon. And we would know that if they came out of the backside of the moon at a certain time, we got our signal back.
Right.
And right on the second.
Yeah.
And I was so excited. I stood up and yelled and screamed into the air because I had discipline not to put it on the intercom. I just screamed as loud as I could. And we did it. That was all about. Any of your listeners, you've got to get through your head that everything we have done in space is purely politics. In my book, you'll read, in fact, before late in the writing of my book, I got it from the Johnson Space Center historian. He had just gotten a CD of a talk and the transcript of the talk between John Kennedy and our administrator at the time, Webb. Mm-hmm. And they were arguing about what the NASA budget ought to be. We hadn't gone anywhere yet. We had done Mercury, and Kennedy and Webb were arguing about what ought to come first. And Webb said, "Well, I think we ought to set our priorities and do low Earth orbit first, and then go to the moon." And Kennedy looked at Webb and he says, "No, we're going to go to the moon first and do low Earth orbit after that." Because he says, because all I care about is beating the Russians. Otherwise, I don't care about space.
Man.
It's in my book. I got the transcript.
That's incredible.
It was always politics.
Yeah.
What we do is politics about it. And people got to understand that if it wasn't about that, the politicians wouldn't do anything.
Wow.
So, after Apollo 11, there was talk among politicians. They wanted to end the program right there. Mm-hmm. This thing you say, there, we did it. Now let's just get out of here before we kill somebody.
Man.
That's exactly what happened. And so they agreed on ending the program. The scientists really raising hell. Mm-hmm. We had 3 missions that we didn't use. So they didn't care.
Wow.
Man, all of a sudden, all they cared about was politics.
Just covering the Russians. That is crazy.
Well, why do you think? Well, here's other stories about that. We had, who was Nelson? Was a senator. They got to fly on shuttle, and there was another one that got to fly on shuttle. It was purely payback, political payback.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, John Glenn flew on shuttle at 77 years old. Uh-huh. I saw him over in the neutral buoyancy facility, the big pool where they were training for zero gravity, and he could barely walk. Mm-hmm. But they put him on shuttle because he had a payback coming from what he did for the Democrats. Politics.
My gosh.
There's nothing starry-eyed about what we've accomplished. I'm sorry.
So what do you think about what's going on today then with, kind of seems like we're on track to get some humans on Mars. Do you think this is similarly you know, f- like fueled by politics, or is it something else?
Well, the political consideration will speed it up.
Okay.
There is no political consideration except they're just kind of humming along, at a slow pace.
Uh-huh.
Ryan's not ready. Ryan won't be ready for a while. Uh, there's no driving force to make him get it done. We had a space station that I worked on in 1980, and I reference this in my book.
Mm-hmm.
In 1979, this guy named Al Levere's engineer uh, pulled about 40 of us together who had slack time on our hands into a building in the back of the lot, as we say, and say, I pulled you together. We're going to write a program plan for a space station. It's going to do everything. Mars is going to be and you got to keep this in mind. It's going to be a transportation node. In other words, it's not there to satisfy a bunch of scientists working on little nano-sized experiments. It's going to be a transportation node, and we're going to build upper stages, and we're going back to the moon, and we're going to go to Mars.
Wow.
That's what we're going to do.
Uh-huh.
And we worked on it from 1980 to 1986. We had the program office at Johnson Space Center, and then a couple of NASA guys decided, who really didn't like Johnson Space Center, I don't think, and they got it moved. The program moved to Washington. And Washington couldn't design a paper sack. I mean, it was just, that was purely politics.
Yeah.
These guys wanted to form their own NASA center in Reston, Virginia, which is Washington as far as I'm concerned. And they halted 6 years of work we had done on this expensive space station and stopped. 146 of us went back to work. Our home offices and all that knowledge, historic knowledge, went away.
Wow.
And started all over again in 8 years, $1 billion, and produced nothing but paper. And then Gabby, who used to be our center director, when he became center director, rather, had a lot of influence, and he just moved it back to Johnson Space Center, but it was too late. And then you asked about politics, and then what happened? I guess Clinton was president at the time, and then what happened is that in order to have our space station, we had to involve the international community,
Mm-hmm.
which meant moving the space station from an orbital inclination of 28.5 degrees, which is essentially around the equator for launches from the Cape, Kennedy, up to 51.6 degrees, so it'd be over Europe.
Oh.
Now you have reduced the payload lift capability of a shuttle by about 2/3.
Oh my gosh.
That was the beginning of the International Space Station and the end of having a space station as a transportation node.
I see. Okay.
Politics.
Yeah. Man, oh
And
man.
so we'll help you. And then they canceled the shuttle program, which is insane.
Yeah.
But they said, we can't afford to there's money. We can't afford to do a $500 million launch with a shuttle and then build a space station and maintain it.
Yeah.
So G.W. Bush said, okay, we're going to cancel the space station, which canceled the shuttle, which President Obama followed through on.
Yeah.
And that was the end of that. And we had to go suck up to the Russians to charge us at the beginning, $20 million a seat on Soyuz, and now it's like over $80 million a seat. They're making money. They make money.
Yeah.
In fist.
So what do you think about the more commercial side of things that's coming along now?
Well, you got to keep in mind, what's the two programs, SpaceX,
And
which Musk, and who is the other one?
is it Blue Origin? Is that what you're thinking of with Bezos?
But they're both fairly successul,
Mm-hmm.
but half of the cost of that is being paid by NASA.
I didn't realize that. Okay.
They're not paying for it themselves. You got to be kidding.
Whew.
So anyway, so that's where we are. We're down to low Earth orbit.
Mm-hmm.
We're working in a space station. This friend of mine who's a scientist just gets angry at me when I point it out. I said, tell me what you have produced to advance the program of going into space. Tell me what you've done. I said, most of the science that's going on up there are nano-sized experiments that you scientists can write up and put on your CV and look good.
Mm-hmm.
But all you're doing is spending a lot of time in zero gravity. You're proving that we can live in space.
Yeah.
But let me ask you a question. If we're going a 9-month one-way trip to Mars, what are you guys doing to prove that we can do medicine in space?
Right.
You going to ask PETA if we can sacrifice a squirrel monkey to test out equipment for surgery in zero gravity?
Yeah.
Can I do that? No.
Right.
Are we building upper stages on orbit so we can go to Mars?
Uh-huh.
No.
Man. Crazy.
I mean, it's easy to be cynical about it, and I am.
Yeah.
People get upset at me because when I give a talk, I anecdotalize a little bit.
Yeah.
Which I did in one of our local libraries. And a couple of the guys who are still active working on the space station came over and he says, you shouldn't talk about NASA like that. I said, why are you not talking about NASA like that? I said, well, my book is warts and all. When I give a talk, it's warts and all.
Yeah.
No, you shouldn't do that. You should make sure that NASA looks as good as possible. I said, I'm sorry, it ain't gonna work that way. Not for me.
Right.
Really got angry at me because there are people that thinks one of the attractions of what I've got to say is because it's warts and all.
Yeah.
And,
I like it. No, I like to hear your perspective, and it's.
But the astronauts don't want to hear it,
Mm-hmm.
and our scientist friends don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
It's a shame. I mean, I got anecdotes in my book that never make another book. God forbid. I'll tell you an anecdote. Unfortunately, I made the mistake of giving it one of the real early autograph conventions, and I asked this guy. I said, "Why don't you let me? You always have an astronaut get up there at the dinner." And I said, "They're always talking about how wonderful life is and all that. Why don't you let me give a talk before dinner?"
Yeah.
Wasn't it good? I told the anecdote about Bruce McCandless. It was a screw up. Bruce McCandless, God love him, was not born with common sense. And but as I said in my book, but he showed us all because he flew the EMU the first time.
Mm-hmm.
You know those famous pictures of him standing out in the middle of nowhere. He really was a good engineer, but he didn't have any common sense.
Right.
And he pulled a lot of Capcom duty. The unfortunate thing was his Capcom console was right next to my console in the control room.
Uh-huh.
The EECOM console, and he just did stuff just drove me crazy. And anyway, what he did was, and I put this, and I gave this little talk. I thought it was going to be rather humorous for everybody. Turns out the astronauts were sitting there stern-faced when I told the anecdote about Bruce. No. They didn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
What happened was we had a block of 48 cubic foot sized lockers for our headsets. So we didn't carry them all the way back to the office. When we were done with a shift, you're done with a simulation, we combination lock and we threw them in there and go back to our offices.
Right. And
they had serial numbers on them. They had, A25, A26, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. I came in one day for simulations, one of the final simulations we had, and in the middle of this block of 48 headset lockers was one of the doors had a yellow plastic dymo marker, the plastic label makers that make embossed labels, and it said Capcom locker. I couldn't believe it. I looked at that and I said, it's got to be McCandless.
Right.
Nobody would not know their 3-digit number for their headset locker. Uh-huh. So I went down to Supply and I got a dymo marker, label maker, yellow tape, and I made 47 more labels that said Capcom locker. So, and I let Al Shepard know because it's Apollo 14 coming up,
Uh-huh.
and Big Al, he played the game of you reset me or I will kill your firstborn child
Oh
type
my,
of thing.
jeez.
That's a they acted that way,
Uh-huh.
and they all feared Al Shepard because that was the military. Don't let them get to know you because they won't fear you anymore.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I told Al what I was going to do. So the day before our shift for Apollo 11, uh, Apollo 14 rather, came. I got there early and I put all 47 lockers, other lockers had Capcom locker on it.
Yeah.
And I had other ones that said this way the Capcom console in case you don't know. And I showed you where this is a Capcom console. This is it. Right and left armrest just in case
Oh,
you get
dude,
it. Bruce knew I did it. I mean,
uh-huh.
he fumed. You ever see a little black cloud above somebody's head when they're fuming?
Right.
He was fuming. So we did TLI, the translunar injection burn to go to the moon, and we were on our way to the moon. They had pulled the lunar module out, and Big Al voices down, "Hey Bruce, you have any problem finding your headset locker today?" I shamed him in front of the whole world, and let me tell you, when I told that anecdote at that convention, the astronauts were not smiling.
Oh
How
my God.
dare I tell a bad story about one of their own?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. The inner office pranks and stuff. That's hilarious.
That's my book. And I told these guys that criticized, I said, it's my book.
Mm-hmm.
It's my stories. And that's what's in the book. Tough luck.
Right.
Go write your own book.
Hell yeah.
Anyway.
I like
That
it,
was my favorite. And I never did take a picture of the headset lockers. I can't believe I didn't do that. But I was just intent upon the joke,
Yeah. Whew, yeah. Okay, so let's jump back a little bit to your time at NASA and stuff and working at EECOM. So I mean, what is an EECOM? What is that? What was your position? What were you responsible for?
Well, back during Mercury, they were just in the early throes of trying to figure out what everybody should be doing and how we should be flying in space,
Mm-hmm.
and they did have a systems guy, a spacecraft guy, and I became an EECOM, and also they became a GNC. The EECOM was responsible for monitoring about half of the spacecraft systems, and essentially they were the life support systems.
Mm-hmm.
All the electricity, the fuel cells, the cryogenics, many of the mechanical systems, and the GNC, guidance navigation control guy who sat next to me in the front room, he was in charge of the jets and the rockets and the computers and the computer hardware, rather not the programming, but the hardware itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so they worked out really well. It became that way probably late Mercury, early in Gemini. Gemini's where these positions, and we developed a back room expert console systems guys in the back room that had better analytic capability and
Mm-hmm.
specialized knowledge. We in the front room, the mission operations control room, had more of not an overview knowledge. We had detailed knowledge too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the flight director who was in charge of all of us had enough knowledge to ask the right questions or ask questions in particular.
Right.
So it was kind of hierarchical, and so if one of my backroom guys says we got a problem with fuel cell 1, I would know exactly what he's trying to tell me, and when he starts explaining it and what the mission rule implications were, the mission implications were, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it became a very important position as far as, in my case, when I came down to Houston in 1964 when I was working for North American, which became North American Rockwell, was building the spacecraft. I was watching the Apollo spacecrafts being built out of manufacturing all that time.
Oh wow!
It was incredible. I was finishing up school, which I did, and then a friend of mine who was ahead of me, Larry Cannon, said, "Hey, they formed up a flight operations group here at Rockwell in Downey, California, that and their job is to support NASA at Houston with information about the spacecraft, technical information, whatever drawings, whatever is required. And I said, boy, that sounds interesting. And then he said, and we're going to, most of the group is going to go down to Houston, and I forget what it was, in a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't willing. I had a family, and I wasn't willing to lose or anything. So I joined the group. I got hired by the group. They put me in charge of two losers, two guys who didn't want to be in Downey, California. They wanted to be back in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And they were really difficult to deal with. And I was their lead engineer. And so finally, after about a year and a half of that, I said, I'm out of here. I need to go where the action's closer. So I moved down to, and my family down to Houston in July 4th, 1964. I forgot how hot and wet Houston could have ever been. It was like a wet blanket, if you're coming from LA.
Yeah.
So I remember driving down in my little 62 Volkswagen, which is a piece of crap. I never realized Volkswagens were that good of a machine. And I got down there, the family flew down, and I drove down, and I didn't realize I was getting into it. In fact, I left at midnight, I remember, and I got to El Paso. It's about 1,600 miles from LA to Houston.
Mm-hmm.
I got to El Paso, and the guy, I was getting gas, and the guy reminded me, he says, you're only halfway to Houston. You still have over 700 miles to go.
Wow, man.
I mean, I didn't realize how big Houston, Texas was.
Yeah.
I drove 16 hours to get to El Paso. I was only halfway to Houston. Incredible.
Yeah.
So anyway, I did all that. I got to Houston. I said, boy, what a hick town this is. What was I? It's not a hick town anymore. Now we have every bit of traffic problems as LA had then and has now.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It just grew leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
Strip centers, just like LA, everything. So anyway, I got to do that. We were in temporary quarters while the Johnson Space Center was the Manned Spacecraft Center at the time, was being constructed in this farm field. And I guess in the next week we moved quarters in now called Johnson Space Center, and that became the thing. And then I discovered what it meant to be a contractor. Back in those days, you were not only NASA employees were permitted to occupy the key positions, like especially like in the mission control room that you say, mission operations control room.
Yeah. Contractors
were expected to be in the back room somewhere.
Okay.
And I remember I was operating our very first mission was AS Apollo Saturn 201, which is a 38-minute lob downrange to test out the big engine and the chutes and stuff like that. And I caught the flu, I think, or it was really a bad cold, and I was out for a week. And they ran simulations every day during that week, training simulations. I came in, sat down on my console in the back room, and this guy, Mort Silver, was the GNC guy. He worked for, North America as well. And I said, hey, Mort, geez, am I able to be back here? I says, Dave Penley was the acting EECOM out in the front room.
Yeah.
And he was I leaned over the Mort and I said, did Dave Penley ever call me for any information while I was gone? And Mort looked at me, he says, not once.
What?
That's when I figured that I was not useful working in the back room, at least back in the. So I applied to switch over to NASA, and I did. January 1966.
Uh-huh.
And that became my career as a NASA employee.
Yeah.
And a flight controller.
Right.
Barely knew what a flight controller was. And I spent my time. I ended up becoming an operations procedures officer. I had to worry about all the proper paperwork in the front room. Did that, and then I became an assistant flight director for a while and decided that wasn't for me. And then I switched over to become a systems engineer over in EECOM.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the best decision I ever made.
Hmm.
I put my time in. I've worked just about every position except the flight dynamics stuff. And then my career really started when I became a full-fledged EECOM on Apollo 8, Apollo 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And then I switched out of there so one of my backroom guys, NASA guys, could get some console time, Billy Moon, and finished up. We swapped. I went to the what they call this spacecraft analysis room, which was a bridge between the engineering world and the flight operations world. It's kind of an interesting thing to do. Mm-hmm. And so Billy worked 15, 16, and 17. He got his licks in, and he got promoted more often than I did. Anyway.
So are there, when you're working as an EECOM, there's multiple shifts and multiple people working on the console, correct? And you guys are switching out during a mission at least?
3 8-hour shifts.
3 8-hour shifts. Okay. Interesting. So, and then I think I read this on your website that you talked about the EECOM position having, a lot of tradition and professionalism and kind of associated with that. What was that kind of like to go into?
Let me see if I can pull it out. After the Apollo 1 pad fire, Gene Kranz, ever the leader, decided that we needed words to live by. Mm-hmm. And they came up with the foundations of mission control.
Oh.
And it's a leadership statement. It says, foundations of mission control, to instill within ourselves these qualities essential for professional excellence: discipline, being able to follow as well as lead, knowing we must master ourselves before we can master our task; competence, there being no substitute for total preparation and complete dedication, for space will not tolerate the carelessness or indifferent; confidence, believing in ourselves as well as others, knowing we must master fear and hesitation before we can see it. There are guys that when I would explain the job to them, they said, "Well, I think I like to be a flight controller." I said, "Okay, let me tell you what you got to be able to do. At the very least, you have to be able to make complicated decisions under a great deal of pressure.
Yeah.
In front of the world."
Yeah, that's a good point.
You willing to do that? No. I said, okay. Anyway, responsibility. Realizing that it did to us, or it belongs to each of us. We must answer for what we do or fail to do.
Yeah.
Toughness. This is where Kranz gets his tough and competent statement he wrote on our boards. Uh-huh. Taking a stand when we must, to try again and again, even if it means following a more difficult path. Teamwork, respecting and utilizing the ability of others, realizing that we work toward a common goal for success depends upon the efforts of all. These are incredible words. Mm-hmm. And then a couple of side notes, which I like to put out. To always be aware that suddenly and unexpectedly we may find ourselves in a role where our performance has ultimate consequences. To recognize that the greatest error is not to have tried and failed, but in trying, we do not give it our best effort.
Oh, yeah.
Incredible words.
Yeah, I like that.
That's incredible. He and Pete Frank, another flight director, put that together. Mm-hmm.
So what was the kind of, mentality and, maybe confidence or something that someone that was either a flight director or flight controller like yourself kind of had to have? Was that kind of, did you receive training for that stuff, or was that more?
No, it's the kind of thing you had to be born with. Let me see if I can find something here. In one of my talks, mm-hmm. I point this out. I write my talks down so I don't ever forget. There's 3 ways to make talks: either right off the top of your head or bullets, mm-hmm. verbatim. My talks are verbatim.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I have everything. If I need to change something, I know I can change it that way. If I have to adjust time, I can adjust time. I can't do it in my head. Like Newt Gingrich was pointed out. He gave a talk to the press club one time, and this young reporter came running up to him. He said, and requesting gee, that was a great speech. Can I have a copy of your talk? And dude looked at the kid and he says, there is no copy. He says, they asked me for an hour talk. I gave him an hour talk.
Yeah. Right.
Comprehensible. Let me see what I said here. Part of the things I've said, and this is apropos to what you, the excitement of the Apollo lunar landing missions during those golden days were heady times, especially for those of us be fortunate enough to be in the front lines.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, we were young, we were fearless, and we were ready to go to the moon because, after all, no one had ever told us young engineers we could successfully land somebody on the moon. And Chuck Dietrich, one day, he told me, he says he was asked, no, he says, sure, curiously, some people wonder how we pulled it off, the hoax that is. And I always say, let them keep wondering. And when asked how we do it, the response of Retrofire Officer Chuck Dietrich was succinct. It was done by a bunch of smart guys who could think straight. Yep. We were very aggressive personalities back in those days. You know, there's. I found later in life there are three distinct types of personalities. You have a passive person, you have an assertive person, and you have an aggressive person. Huh. We were all aggressive.
Really?
We didn't care what you thought. We were right. The assertive person worries about how you receive what I'm asking you to do.
Okay.
That's care about the other person, how they feel. This way to word stuff, you get people to do what you want without pissing them off.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't care.
Yeah.
We were just aggressive.
Yeah.
It turns out in later life, that doesn't carry over into regular life.
Yeah.
When you interrupt people and you want to put yourself forward all the time and your ideas are always correct and nobody else's is. And you have that root, all that. It's amazing how but that's what it took.
That's what you needed, huh?
There was none of that political correctness back in those days.
Right.
The only guy we couldn't tell off was Chris Kraft. He would fire us. He was so autocratic. But everybody else, including the flight directors, we could, and the astronauts, we could disagree with them as we don't think that's right. But if you want to do it, go ahead.
Wow.
But that's interested in psychology. And I saw it all change on shuttle, where career ladders became more important in getting the job done. PC, everything became PC. If I watched in this job I had in between, I watched this engineer get up and try to defend a mission rule or a pre-thought out course of action if something happened. Mm-hmm. A mission rule. Try to pre-plan as much as possible, and he's got up to defend an addition of a mission rule, the upcoming mission, shuttle mission. And one of the managers is sitting on the board listening to him. He says, "No, we ain't got to do that." And the guy says, "Okay," sat down.
Wow.
Different.
Yeah.
Totally different.
Interesting how things change.
Well, bureaucracies have a life of their own.
Uh-huh.
NASA became a bureaucracy through Apollo and Skylab and Apollo Soyuz. And so what happened was we got the shuttle and I saw it happen. And career ladders became more important than anything else. And that's why we ran into problems on shuttle, in my view. And what happened after when Apollo was finished, was terminated, Congress had decisions to make. They could either cancel NASA, because NASA was created to create a huge project and follow it through and make it successful, or they could give it a different program of equal size, so they could continue with the bureaucracy that had been formed in, or they could do nothing.
Yeah,
they did nothing. And bureaucracies are created to survive, and that's what happened.
Yeah. Man. Okay, so
whatever.
can you walk me through the Apollo 13 and your role in that, and maybe how this whole, how that culture kind of applied to that, emergency?
Well, let's just put it this way. I remember giving a talk to an IT group in Chicago, and I didn't prepare for the question, but the question was, um, I don't know if I have it here. The question was, um, how long did it take to make all the decisions that we had to make on Apollo 13?
Uh-huh.
And I finally got around to doing that, and it was less than a day,
Wow.
less than 8 hours. We had every major decision. I don't have the slide here. Every major decision that we had to make were all made in that short time.
Incredible.
Well, here's the Apollo 13 decision timeline. 55, 54, 53, the tank exploded. And see, 66, 63 hours, 79. I would say it was a day.
Mm-hmm.
We had it all thought out.
Yeah.
I mean, as a team, engineering and flight operations people together.
Yeah.
It wasn't just flight operations people like myself. Although we were the executors,
Mm-hmm.
we had to execute whatever procedures they came up with. So at least you can know that the decisions were made very quickly. They were so obvious that we couldn't fire the big engine because it was probably hit by the panel that blew off the service module.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to use the lunar module descent engine, which is not as powerful as the big engine at the aft end of the service module. It was bing, bing, bing. It was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to go around the moon. We had to do a burn that put us in a free return. In fact, Apollo 13 was the first mission we didn't have a free return, which meant if the big engine didn't fire to put us in lunar orbit, we would just go around the moon and come right back to the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Because of lighting considerations at the landing site, they had to change the trajectory so that we were not free return in case the big engine didn't work.
Oh, okay, I see.
So when the decision was made to go around the moon and come right back to Earth, do a burn engine to put us on a non-free return, on a free return trajectory that is intersecting the Earth.
Yeah.
We didn't do it. We would have been 20,000 miles out of nowhere.
Whew. Man.
So.
Yeah.
And then when the decision came down, we didn't have enough consumables left to use in the lunar module. We had to speed up the return. We did another burn to speed up the return.
Uh-huh.
Amazing, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what was my job? Well, as I said, my job included the cryogenics stored in the service module of the spacecraft. And I don't know what came over me, but it turns out 47 hours into the mission, we had a problem with the quantity readout from oxygen tank number 2. Now, these are cryo. These are like liquid.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's no big deal because we had the 2 oxygen tanks or 2 hydrogen tanks, and they were plumbed together. We just opened the valves on both tanks so they would feed at the same time.
Okay.
And we had a procedure developed that allowed us to turn the heaters off in a tank that was getting out of balance too high. And made a procedure so we would use the tank that was feeding too much, turn it off, and feed the higher tank down until they were within 2.5% of each other. Okay. And that was the mission rule.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just a simple little thing.
Yeah.
So we didn't care. I mean, we could always, if we were within those requirements, then if we lost any of the instrumentation on one tank, we could infer what the bad tank was by looking at the good tank because they were identical and coming down together.
Right. Smart.
So that had happened. So 47 hours. Who knows why maybe a solder joint came loose. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Probably was more of the what happened on pre-launch when we overheated the tank.
Yeah.
Anyway, so at 49 hours, we said, let's try another stir. So there were two little fans, I should have told you, there was a heater core tube and a fan at each end. And we would turn the fans on to homogenize the material in the tank.
Uh-huh.
What happened was in zero gravity, the cryogenic material would stratify in different densities.
Oh.
And the transducer that was reading those quantities, was this full diameter tank, would get faked out. So we would turn the fan on to stir it up and make it homogenize it so we get an accurate reading. That's called stirring the cryos. After that, they took the fans out, took all the wiring out, and said, we don't need that. We'll just shake the spacecraft up a little bit and that'll take care of you. So these things go away when you don't think you need them anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what happened was, at 49 hours, they decided, let's try it one more time. They turned the fans on in oxygen tank number 2 one more time to see if maybe the reading came back. It didn't. So they let it go and didn't do another stir until, what was the time? And we were in lunar orbit, 90 hours? I can't remember when we stirred the cryos. I'm going to have to remember this anyway. 55 hours.
Okay.
55 hours in the mission. And the plan was the crew would stir the cryos after they woke from their sleep period every day.
Uh-huh.
Part of the post-sleep checklist, little things you got to do, housekeeping things. And they would turn the fans on, all 4 of them, 2H2, 2O2, and stir the cryos. And we dutifully on the ground would note the correct, accurate readings and plot it to make sure that the quantity was being utilized at a rate that would get us through the mission safely.
Mm-hmm.
The consumables was very important subject, obviously.
Yeah. So
we did that, and for some reason, I decided before I got off shift, before the crew went to sleep, began their sleep period 1 hour during the last hour of my 8-hour shift.
Right.
And then they would sleep, and the next shift of flight controllers would babysit the spacecraft until the crew finished their sleep period. And the last hour of their sleep period, and through the post-sleep housekeeping things would be done.
Right.
And let what happened while they were sleeping and stuff like that. And then the next shift would come on and perform the duties for the day. Anyway, and just for some reason, being a good flight controller, I wanted more data. So, back in those days, we hand plotted stuff, and we had slide rules, which I still have mine.
Yeah.
Computers were just barely coming online.
Yeah.
The computers we had were big 360-75s, mainframes down on the first floor that IBM sold us to do all the trajectory work and data processing work.
I see.
We didn't have, if we want to get, and all the consoles are all hardwired. Every light, everything was hardwired. If you wanted to change something, it took forever.
Jeez.
So, not now. Now they're all workstations.
Yeah.
You can figure it any way you want to.
Right.
So anyway, I said, well, I just want more data before I go home. So I asked the crew to do, and you'll hear that in the air-to-ground voice transcript. That's part of my book.
Mm-hmm.
Hear all that. I asked the flight director, Gene Kranz, I said, before the crew goes to sleep, I'd like them to give me a sterile 4 tanks. And they did, and then the tank blew up.
Yeah.
And I felt terrible about it. Of course, my job was to recognize what the hell happened.
Yeah.
Which was wild, because it was disbelief that tanks don't blow up. They just don't. They're solid titanium, and they don't fail. But it did.
Mm-hmm.
We did that. There was the wiring in the tanks was all scorched, and cracked, and they were twisted pair. So it didn't take much of a jiggle for the two wires to short out, and a spark was created, and a raging fire ensued, and in seconds, that was the end of everything.
Yep.
So, and it was the last hour of my shift. And I suffered psychologically for that, because we flight controllers, we're not taught to be that way, but it's implied.
Yeah.
Have to be perfect, and I wasn't perfect, and it bothered me. And it turns out that if I hadn't asked for that stir then, and it didn't occur until after the crew had turned on the lunar module using up all the consumables, or they were down on the lunar surface, or they went to pull out the lunar module on the way to the moon, and they couldn't pull the lunar module out.
Yeah.
Because their space, it was just flopping around. And it turns out it couldn't have been a better time for it to happen. Something made me ask. Something made me ask for an extra stir. If I hadn't done that, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows what would have happened?
So was that?
The old saying is, once you feel badly about something, no good deed goes unpunished, is the old saying.
Yeah.
Well, turns out that it was a good deed, and I didn't have to be punished for it.
Yeah. So I mean, was that comforting later to kind of realize that?
No, it took a long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had some bad dreams about that, and it's all part of the neurosis of trying to be perfect.
Oh man.
The dreams that you remember are waking dreams, not dreams that occur while you REM and all that. The waking dream is the last thing you dream, and you remember it. And I would relive the damn thing.
Man.
I'd wake up. Waking dream. It happened all over again. The tank, blah, 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 and I slunk off the console, and this went on for 2 weeks.
Wow.
Every morning. And one morning at the end of the 2-week period, it always reminds me of learning to drink scotch. It took me to learn to drink scotch by having a scotch once a day. This guy said that's what you ought to do if you want to learn scotch, and I went, and it worked. Anyway, so I had this dream. Once I said, "Oh no, here it comes again," and so we asked for the stir. The tank, the fire occurred in the tank. I could see it was, and I was making all the right calls. I said, "We got to pull the breakers, the heater breakers on panel 226. We got to do this. We got to do that." It looks like the tank blew up. I did everything perfectly. The end result was exactly the same. I never had the dream again.
Oh, okay. Very interesting.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. Whew, man.
It fixed me.
Wow. Yeah, that is crazy. The effects that would have on you, and I mean, it's just so.
Because I thought I was supposed to be perfect. Remember?
Yeah.
It was my fault. I thought I was supposed to be perfect.
But I mean, was it really your fault? It was kind of inevitable that would have happened. It was just a random.
No, it was guaranteed it was going to happen.
Yeah.
See, the fan wiring that it was attributed to, I don't know if you understand what twisted pair is. They're small gauge wires because there's little fans.
Yeah.
And the wires are twisted around for support. They weren't shielded. And when we did this, if you read up on the failure, the engineers on the ground burnt the crap out of that tank.
Yep.
They raised the temperature in the tank on 2 occasions to over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was that hot.
And it charred. And they duplicated the failure on post-mission after they took all the data, the fine-tuned data we could get after the mission. Every nanosecond of data, and recreated everything. And it was the wire. I don't know if I took a picture of it here. I have a talk I give, the anatomy of the failure.
Oh.
Everything you could ever want to know.
Yeah.
Where is picture of the wires? I guess I don't have it in this one. Anyway, it was a twisted pair, and the Teflon insulation was cracked, wide cracks in the wires. It wouldn't have taken much, and it didn't take much. If I hadn't asked for the extra share, it probably could have occurred when they woke up. They did their post, or maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe it wouldn't have happened until they turned on the lunar module and started using up all the precious consumables.
Mm-hmm.
It could have happened when they're on the ground.
Yeah. Whew.
We probably couldn't have docked.
Yeah.
If you could have docked, they would have died.
Man. So how long after the explosion did you make the call to not land on the moon?
Well, that was part of the mission rules. Once Gene Kranz, the flight director, effected the mission rules, all I had to say was, it looks like we've lost 2 fuel cells. We ain't landing on the moon.
Okay.
I didn't say it. All I had to do is report on the system. Kranz reported then on the implication of that, even though we all knew the implication that you don't land with 2 out of 3 fuel cells dead, half of all your electrical equipment dead. Mm-hmm. You're not doing it.
I see. So that was just the protocol. You guys all knew that it was not going to happen.
Yeah. Okay. And you can hear it on the intercom loop traffic. You'll hear me still.
Yeah.
So it was about 20 minutes before we all, Kranz and I, because we were talking about it all, it became very clear that, the old saying that denial is not just a river in Egypt, because everybody was in denial, that especially Kranz was in denial. So was I. But 20 minutes was over.
Yeah. Well, that's the mindset you needed, was that, you were in denial that you guys were going to fail, right?
No, I thought it was just a funny with the instrumentation system like it was on Apollo 12. And we'd solve everything with a switch flip like we did on Apollo 12.
Yeah.
It's going to happen here.
Yeah.
It was and it was the last hour of my shift. That's the reason I called my little Apollo 13 talk the longest hour. Was it, takeoff on the movie title. And it was just the last hour. I was ready to go home.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it worked out pretty well because the relieving shift, Glenn Lundy's black team, had already come on board over a half hour ahead of time.
Oh.
And we overlapped. So Clint Burton, who was the relieving EECOM for me, had already read the console log. He already was totally up to speed in what we were doing.
Good.
And we already had other people coming in. So I went home.
Yeah.
I went down and looked at data, and I saw the fire in the tank with that real fine-tooth data that we had coming in.
Yeah.
And it was all there.
Man. Damn. Well, Cy, this is awesome. Yeah. I love hearing this story from you. It's really awesome.
You'll if you get the book, make sure it's got the CD with it. If you're buying a used book, the CD is really important.
Yeah, I cannot wait to check that out. Yeah, so just so we know, so everyone listening, your book is Apollo EECOM, Journey of a Lifetime. Yeah,
right.
And that's, is it on Amazon right now? Is it available?
You can probably find a used copy of a hardback, or you can find the softback, which is what we printed afterwards. We print on demand that way.
Yeah.
I don't understand how that works, but there's a machine. You put the files in one end, and a book comes out the other end. It's totally. But it's the softback version. It's been updated a little bit. That's the one you'll get. They all have the CD with it, which has got stuff on it you would never find anywhere else.
Nice.
Let's see what else came out of that. And Amazon should have it. If not, you can always contact. Where did you get your copy? Do you know?
I saw it on Amazon. That's where I got mine.
Okay, yeah, you can find it on Amazon. They're not expensive on Amazon. It's softback, but make sure it's used, that it's got the CD, because you're going to miss an awful lot. What happens is, if I tell an anecdote where I got to an argument with somebody, like another flight director, it's backed up on the on the CD, the actual intercom voice traffic where we have the argument. So,
Oh, awesome.
oh yeah, I had one case where I couldn't get the flight director, who was a fairly new flight director, to do. I wanted to ask the crew a question. That was one of the hot spots for us. They never. The flight directors always had this excuse: "Let's not bother the crew right now."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, as a systems guy, if I have a funny and I need to know something because I haven't got the information on my console, I need to know it.
Yeah.
Don't tell me, don't tell me, let's not bother the crew now, because you'll hit my hot button in a second. And this guy, he was a fairly new flight director, and he wouldn't listen to me.
Huh.
And we got an hour behind in the flight plan because of him not understanding what I was asking him to do. And he refused to say, come up here and show me. He wanted to, people do that. What they'll do is they'll ask you a question, that gives them a little information, and then they'll ask another question. They still don't know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
We could have done it in 5 seconds, just showing them a drawing.
Yeah.
He had that ego problem.
Oh, no.
And I finally, after it was Apollo 15, and Dave Scott called down. He says, oh, you want me to do that now? Now we're an hour behind in the flight plan because we wouldn't ask him if he had done that procedure, which I had no insight to, and you'll see in the book. Anyway, so
Jeez.
I was livid, and
Yeah.
my console was just down one tier and off to the side a little bit from the flight director console, so I could just get up from the console, lean over his, which was up a little bit from mine, and talk.
Yeah.
And I got up from my console and I looked at him and I said, Windler, one of these days you're going to hurt somebody with that attitude.
Ooh.
And he came over the top of the console at me.
Oh my gosh.
See, that's how we were back in those days.
Yeah. Oh man, I can't wait to check out that CD. Okay,
That's
sweet.
Keep telling your boss at work, if that's what you get, that he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, and he's going to leave.
Whew.
Anyway, you'll see a lot of that, and I backed that up. I had one of my backroom guys try. I wanted people to understand how difficult it was being a front room flight controller, because sometimes you had people giving you inputs left and right on the intercom,
Mm-hmm.
and they were bad, and you had to say, I'm not going to do that. And my one of my backroom guys violated that. He's telling me, give me bad data. He said, you got to do that. You got to do that. I said, I'm not doing that. And it was really difficult. And I backed it up. I had that on voice too.
Yeah.
Every loop that we talked on in the control center was being recorded in what we call the voice station.
Uh-huh.
Big 24-track tape.
Yeah.
So I needed to have some dubs, as we call it. I just have to specify the GMT times I wanted and the actual loop nomenclature I wanted, like systems engineering or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And they would produce the tapes, and I've got.
Yeah.
Like I said, my friend said, I think I'll throw the book away and keep the CD.
Yeah. Well, it's so awesome that all this stuff was recorded like that. It's great for
But
people. Yeah.
The master's gone now.
Really?
Some I either destroyed, or most of those voice tapes are gone.
Man.
The communication tapes. Too bad.
Yeah. Really.
Yeah. Can't go back.
True.
But you can in my book, because I saved a lot of stuff. In fact, the original tapes from my console, Apollo 13, are in the if they're still there, they're in the Cosmosphere. No, the one in Seattle. Oh God, the Cosmosphere is in Hutchinson, Kansas, and the one, the Museum of Flight in Seattle.
Oh.
They have the original tapes that I sold them, mounted and sold.
Nice.
Yeah, well, it exists.
Yeah.
That's the nice thing about it. Anyway, get that. Get my book. Get the Cox Murray book.
Mm-hmm.
How he did it, and that I think I told you the IEEE piece they did on Houston. We have a solution.
Oh.
If you want, I'll have the link to that. But they said that was it is the most visited link that the IEEE ever had.
Wow.
One of their members did a project, and he did Apollo 13 coverage
Mm-hmm.
story. It is so well done. It
Wow.
is really it's Houston. We have a solution.
Okay. Sweet. Yeah, I want to check all that stuff
You
out.
have everything you need to know, and I'm not recommending any astronaut books. You
Oh
don't need
man.
to.
Yeah.
Uh,
Cool. And I'll have links to your book and your website, apolloecom.com, so people can check out all that
yeah,
stuff and learn
yeah.
more about you.
I just renewed it. My my webmaster said, I haven't looked at that in 10 years. And after he did all those 5-6 pages of things, he
Yeah.
says, but you're not using the right tools anymore. The tools now are far in advanced. And I said, I don't care. People know
No,
how to use the website. They'll be
yeah.
able to stuff.
It looks cool. I love
But
it. All the animation and stuff, the flash
well,
animation.
he
Yeah.
wanted $800 to update the website. I said, I don't do that. Don't have to. So,
Oh man.
well,
Cool.
it's the way it is. And of course, then I went on and did after Apollo went on did Skylab for a year, and then Apollo Soyuz, which was a real experience with the Russians.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told everybody when I came back, I spent 2 weeks over there understanding how they did business, and I came back and I told everybody, I says, they may be white, but they're not like us. Not like us. They
Wow.
don't think like us. Don't. I mean, they were so cautious about what they said back in those days, the Soviet Union.
Uh-huh.
And I like to characterize it as you ask one of the Soviet engineers what time it is. He goes like this. He says, "What do you want to know? Why do you want to know?"
Wow.
They didn't do anything. What do you got to trade? That kind of thing.
Interesting. Huh.
They were just. It was really. It was. I wrote a story about that when I got back. They're just not like us.
Man.
They couldn't understand why, when they came over here, for us to train them in how our system worked, spacecraft and control center. I remember, I was the lead guy, so I did a lot of the overview stuff, and I'm just showing them the inside of the spacecraft and all the switches, and just one guy in the front, because we had an interpreter, said, "Why do you have so many switches?" And then it dawned on me, because they don't have switches. They don't have switches like that at all in the Soyuz. Everything was done from the ground. So I said, "Oh, now I understand." I says, "When we designed our spacecraft, we designed it with the man in the loop.
Uh-huh.
When you designed yours, the man is out of the loop. It's all
Interesting.
ground."
Huh.
Oh, okay. He couldn't understand why we had all these switches.
Wow. Very interesting. So just a
Everything,
completely different way of doing it.
oh yeah, everything was done from the ground. They didn't trust. But I understand now it's a lot better. But still, that was really a revelation for everybody.
Yeah.
Man in the loop, no man in the loop. Or now we say crew. Yeah, what's your genders?
Yes, yes, yes.
I still can't do it. We have a crewed spacecraft or a manned spacecraft.
Right.
That's crewed. Okay.
Man.
Anything else you want to know? Because I'm.
No, this is great. I mean,
Sorry.
thank you. Yeah, we've been talking for over an hour. I appreciate your time.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good. I'll have all the links to everything and everything. So appreciate it, Sai. Thank you so much.
Well, good luck. Let me know if you get any more questions.
Will do. We'll have a good one, all right?
Yeah.